Chosen one, what if I told you that your isolation isn't rejection? It's preparation. They never wanted you to know this, but you need to hear it now. You've been feeling it. The distance growing between you and the people you once trusted. The silence in rooms that used to be filled with conversation. The undeniable sense that you are walking this road alone. You may have asked yourself, why is this happening to me? The loneliness, the isolation, the constant feeling that no one truly understands you. It feels like everything and everyone is being stripped away. Like God has pressed pause on your life while the rest of the world keeps moving forward. But what if I told you that this isn't a punishment? It's a process. What if I told you that this season of isolation is not about what you've lost, but about what's being built within you? Many chosen ones experience this. It is a pattern that repeats itself throughout history, before elevation, before breakthrough, before stepping into divine purpose. There is always a season of solitude. They never wanted you to realize this. They wanted you to believe that being alone meant you were forgotten, that losing people meant you were unworthy. But the truth is, God removes distractions when He is preparing you for something greater. The people who left, the relationships that crumbled, the doors that closed, they weren't meant to be there for the next phase of your journey. You are not being punished, you are being set apart. And in this video, we're going to break it all down. If this message is already speaking to you, like this video and comment 77 below. Because by the end of this, you'll understand that your isolation is not the end. It is the beginning of something far greater than you ever imagined. Why chosen ones experience isolation? From the moment you were set apart, you were never meant to fit in. You always felt different, like an outsider, even in rooms full of people. There was something about you that others couldn't quite understand. A depth, a wisdom, an energy that set you apart. You sensed things others ignored. You saw beyond the surface. And because of that, you could never truly blend in. But for years, you tried. You forced yourself into friendships that drained you, relationships that didn't align with your spirit, environments that suffocated your growth. You dimmed your light to make others comfortable. You silenced your intuition to avoid standing out. You followed paths that never truly felt like yours, hoping that maybe, if you just tried harder, you would finally feel at home. But deep down, something always felt off. No matter how much you tried to blend in, the feeling of being different never left you. It wasn't just in your mind, it was in your spirit. Because you were never meant to fit in. You were chosen to stand apart. And then, one by one, things started falling away. People turned against you. Friends became distant. Plans collapsed. The places where you once felt at home no longer felt right. The invitations stopped coming. The people you once called family no longer checked in. The relationships you poured your heart into suddenly ended without explanation. At first, you may have thought you did something wrong. Maybe you replayed conversations in your head, wondering if you had said or done something to cause the distance. Maybe you questioned your worth, asking why the people you loved could so easily walk away. But this was never about rejection, it was about elevation. You weren't losing people. You were shedding what no longer served your purpose. God saw what you could not see. He heard conversations you didn't hear. He witnessed betrayals before they happened. He knew the weight of your calling and how it required you to be surrounded by those who could carry it with you. Some people were removed from your life not because they were bad, but because they were not equipped to walk the path you are on. Your isolation is your protection. Look at the great leaders in Scripture. Moses was isolated before he led his people to freedom. Joseph was thrown into prison before he stepped into his destiny. Even Jesus withdrew into the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Why? Because elevation requires separation. Amos 3 verse 3 says, "Can two walk together except they be agreed?" Not everyone can walk where God is leading you. Not everyone has the capacity to carry the anointing you carry. Some people were in your life for a season, but they were never meant to go with you into your next chapter. The problem is, sometimes we try to hold on to people God is trying to remove. We chase relationships He is breaking for a reason. We cry over doors that were closed for our protection. But just like gold is refined in fire, you are being purified in isolation. This is not a season of punishment. It is a season of preparation. You are being stripped of the distractions, the false identities, the illusions, and the people who were never truly for you. Not to break you, but to make you unshakable, to make you ready for what is coming next. And now you are starting to see the signs. The things you once tolerated are no longer acceptable. The people who drained your energy no longer have access to you. The places that once felt comfortable now feel suffocating. You are no longer willing to shrink yourself to fit into spaces you've outgrown. You feel an internal shift, a restlessness, a knowing, a deep recognition that you are being called to something greater. And even though this season of isolation feels painful at times, there is a peace growing within you. You are starting to see the patterns, to understand that nothing was lost, only realigned. The relationships that ended were not rejections. They were redirections. The solitude you are experiencing is not loneliness. It is alignment. The discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are evolving. This is your confirmation. You were not abandoned. You were chosen. God is pulling you away from the noise so He can speak to you more clearly. He is removing the distractions so you can hear His voice. He is stripping away the old so He can bring you into the new. Do not fight this process. Do not try to return to places God has already called you out of. Do not chase what He has already removed. The people who are meant for you will find you. The relationships that are aligned with your purpose will naturally gravitate towards you. The doors that are meant to open will open without you having to force them. But first, you must embrace the isolation. You must trust the process. You must allow God to complete the work He has started in you. Comment set apart if you know God is preparing you for something greater. And now, let's talk about the signs that your isolation is actually a divine test. Signs that your isolation is a divine test. There comes a point in the journey of every chosen one where nothing makes sense anymore. The things that once felt exciting now seem meaningless. The people you relied on slowly fade away. The plans you once made no longer feel aligned with where you're headed. You try to go back to the familiar, to the old environments that once brought you comfort, but something inside you knows they no longer fit. It's as if you've outgrown everything overnight, yet you're not sure what comes next. And in the midst of all of this, an overwhelming sense of isolation takes over. You feel alone, disconnected, misunderstood. It feels like you are walking through a season of endless silence, waiting for answers that never seem to come. But what if I told you that this season of isolation is not a punishment? It's a test. What if I told you that what feels like an abandonment is actually an invitation? God is not rejecting you. He is refining you. And if you are in this season right now, it means you are being prepared for something far greater than you can imagine. But the test is not easy. It will stretch you in ways you never expected. One of the biggest signs that your isolation is divinely orchestrated is the overwhelming sense that life as you knew it is unraveling. The things that once brought you joy now feel empty. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now feel forced. The people you counted on suddenly stop showing up. The doors that once opened so easily are now locked. Everything around you seems to be falling apart, and no matter how hard you try to fix it, nothing seems to work. You may find yourself asking, why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? But the truth is, you are not being punished, you are being transformed. Your patience is being tested. Your faith is being refined. Every delay, every setback, every moment of waiting is designed to prepare you for the next level of your journey. The things that are falling apart are not meant for where you're going. The people who are leaving were never meant to stay. The doors that are closing are protecting you from what is not aligned with your purpose. This is the part of the journey where trust is required. You don't need all the answers yet. You just need to trust that God is making a way. The Bible tells us that God always tests those He chooses before He elevates them. Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 says, "And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee, and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart." Your isolation is your wilderness. Just as the Israelites wandered through the desert before reaching the promised land, just as David hid in caves before he became king, just as Jesus fasted in the wilderness before stepping into his ministry. This season is your preparation. It is designed to strip away distractions, remove what no longer serves you, and reveal what is truly in your heart. It is in the wilderness that you learn who you are without external validation. It is in the silence that you learn how to hear God's voice. It is in the waiting that your endurance is tested. Because if you cannot handle the silence now, you won't be able to handle the weight of your calling later. This is where you are strengthened. This is where you are purified. This is where you are refined into the person you are meant to become. And if you are paying attention, you will begin to see the signs. You will notice that your desires are shifting. The things that once tempted you no longer hold power over you. The things that once distracted you no longer seem appealing. You will start craving solitude, not because you are lonely, but because your soul knows it needs to be still. You will feel drawn to spiritual wisdom, finding messages and scriptures that confirm what you've been sensing all along. You will experience moments of clarity, sudden insights, divine revelations, moments where everything starts making sense. And you will realize that the people who left were not your foundation, the plans that failed were not your future, and the things that changed were never meant to last. What felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like loss was actually alignment. God has been moving things behind the scenes, stripping away what is not meant for you so that when the time comes, you will be ready to step fully into your calling. This is the point where most people give up. They mistake the silence for abandonment. They mistake the waiting for punishment. But those who endure, those who trust the process, those who embrace the wilderness instead of running from it, they are the ones who will rise. They are the ones who will step into something greater than they ever imagined. Because God does not take you through isolation without a reason. He does not remove people without a purpose. He does not close doors unless He is preparing to open better ones. But He needs to know, can you trust Him in the waiting? Can you stand firm in the silence? Can you believe in the vision even when you cannot yet see it? The answer to that question will determine everything. If you know in your heart that this season of isolation is not a punishment but a test, if you are ready to trust the process instead of fighting it, comment "I trust God" below. Because next, we are going to uncover the power of being alone with God and how this solitude is actually your greatest blessing. Before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you want to support this channel, click the super thanks button. It helps us continue spreading these messages. Now, let's talk about what happens when you embrace your solitude and step into divine alignment. The power of being alone with God. There is something sacred about solitude. When everything is stripped away, when the voices of others grow distant, when the distractions of the world fade, that is when you begin to hear God the clearest. But for many people, solitude feels unbearable. They fear the silence, believing that loneliness is a sign of failure, a punishment, a void that must be filled. They rush to escape it, seeking validation, keeping themselves busy, numbing the discomfort instead of facing it. But chosen ones are different. Your isolation is not a curse. It is a calling. It is an invitation to step into deeper intimacy with God, to receive wisdom and revelation that cannot be found in the noise of the world. When you stop running from solitude and embrace it, you will realize that it was never meant to break you. It was meant to strengthen you. The very thing you have been avoiding is where your greatest transformation will take place. And yet, this is where many people struggle the most. Sitting alone with yourself means confronting everything that has been buried. Your fears, your doubts, your pain, the parts of you that you have tried to ignore. It is in solitude that the real work begins, where the illusions fall away, where you must face who you truly are without the masks, without the roles, without the external validation. And for many, this is terrifying. Maybe you have felt it, the sudden discomfort when everything goes quiet, the urge to distract yourself, to scroll, to call someone, to avoid the silence. But what if I told you that silence is where your answers are? What if I told you that the very thing you have been running from is the key to your breakthrough? You cannot hear God clearly when your spirit is crowded with noise. You cannot receive revelation when your mind is consumed with the opinions of others. You cannot step into your divine purpose if you are too afraid to be still. The Bible tells us that Jesus often withdrew from the crowds to be alone with God. Luke 5 verse 16 says, "And he withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed." If the Son of God needed solitude to align with his mission, how much more do we? Before Jesus performed miracles, before he stepped into his full purpose, he retreated into isolation to pray, to fast, to seek divine instruction. This pattern is not a coincidence. The wilderness is not a place of punishment. It is a place of preparation. When God is about to elevate you, he will first separate you. He will remove the distractions, cut off the unnecessary voices, and pull you into a season where it is just you and him. Because what he is preparing you for requires clarity, strength, and spiritual depth that cannot be cultivated in a crowd. You are not being isolated because you are forgotten. You are being set apart because you are chosen. And when you finally surrender to the solitude, you will begin to see the transformation. The voices of doubt that once tormented you will grow quieter. The anxiety that weighed on your soul will start to lift. The things that once consumed your energy will no longer have the same hold on you. Instead, you will feel an unshakable peace, a clarity that cannot be explained, only experienced. The questions that once kept you up at night will start to be answered, not by external sources, but by divine revelation. You will begin to notice how God speaks in ways you never saw before, through scripture, through signs, through moments of stillness that suddenly make everything clear. You will start to recognize that the solitude was never emptiness. It was alignment. The separation was never about loss. It was about positioning. And as this shift happens, you will no longer crave the noise. You will no longer seek external validation. You will no longer feel the need to fill every quiet moment with something. Because you will realize that solitude is not loneliness. It is intimacy with God. This is the awakening. This is the moment where everything begins to make sense. Where the longing for distractions fades. Where the need for approval disappears. Where you finally understand why you had to walk this road alone. The people who left were never meant to guide you, God was. The doors that closed were never meant to sustain you, God was. The moments of silence were never meant to punish you. They were meant to teach you how to hear his voice. And once you learn to hear him clearly, you will never be the same. Because those who have encountered God in solitude walk with a different kind of strength. They move with purpose, with clarity, with a peace that cannot be shaken. They no longer fear being alone because they know they are never truly alone. They understand that solitude is not a weakness, it is a weapon. If you are ready to stop running from the silence, if you are ready to hear what God has been trying to tell you all along, comment "I am listening" below. Because next, we are going to uncover how to use this season to strengthen yourself for what is coming next. What happens after the isolation? What does life look like when this season ends? Stay with me because this is where everything shifts. How to use this time to strengthen yourself. This moment in your life is not just about waiting, it is about preparation. You may feel like things are standing still, like nothing is moving forward, like you are stuck in a cycle of waiting with no clear direction. But what if I told you that this season is not meant to slow you down? It is meant to build you up. You are not simply in a holding pattern. You are in a training ground. This is where your faith is tested, your character is refined, and your purpose becomes clear. Many people waste this time, allowing frustration, doubt, and impatience to consume them. But chosen ones see it differently. They understand that when God places them in isolation, he is not delaying them, he is developing them. And if you learn how to use this time wisely, you will come out stronger, wiser, and more prepared for what is ahead than you ever imagined. Yet, this is where so many struggle. The silence, the lack of movement, the feeling that nothing is changing. It can feel unbearable. Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough, but nothing is happening. Maybe you've been asking for direction, but all you're met with is silence. Maybe you're watching others move forward while you feel like you're stuck in the same place. The temptation in this season is to grow weary, to start questioning whether you heard God correctly, to wonder if you've been forgotten. But understand this, if God has called you, he will equip you. But before he elevates you, he must prepare you. And preparation often looks like isolation. It looks like discipline. It looks like lessons that don't make sense in the moment but will be crucial when your time comes. This is why so many fail to step into their destiny. Not because they weren't called, but because they weren't prepared when the moment arrived. They wasted the training period. They resisted the process. They allowed frustration to overtake them instead of embracing the refinement. But you are different. You are being given this time for a reason. The question is, will you use it wisely? The Bible shows us this pattern over and over again. David was anointed as king, but he didn't take the throne immediately. Instead, he spent years tending sheep, developing the skills and heart that would later make him a great ruler. Imagine if he had grown impatient, if he had despised the waiting, if he had rejected the lessons in the field. He would not have been ready for the kingdom when his time came. The same happened with Joseph. He had dreams of ruling, but before stepping into his destiny, he endured betrayal, slavery, and prison. Why? Because his character needed to be refined. He needed to learn wisdom, patience, humility, and resilience. Had he stepped into his position too soon, he would not have been equipped to handle it. Zechariah 4 verse 10 reminds us, "For who hath despised the day of small things?" Your preparation season may feel insignificant, but it is the foundation for everything that is coming. Do not despise this time. Do not rush through it. Use it. Grow in it. Learn from it. Because when the moment arrives, you won't have time to get ready. You will need to already be ready. And if you pay attention, you will start to see signs that this season is transforming you. You will notice a deepening of your faith, a strengthening of your spirit, a sharpening of your discernment. The things that used to trigger you will no longer have the same effect. The fears that once held you back will start to lose their grip. You will begin to crave wisdom, seeking knowledge, understanding scripture in ways you never did before. Your desires will shift. What once entertained you may now feel empty. The things you used to tolerate will no longer align with who you are becoming. This is evidence that the process is working. You are being stretched, molded, refined, and prepared for something greater. And when the time comes, when God opens the door, when the opportunity presents itself, you will not hesitate. You will know that you are ready. Because while others were distracted, while others were complaining, while others were doubting, you were preparing. You were using your isolation to build yourself into the person who is capable of carrying the weight of your calling. This is not a season of waiting. It is a season of training. And what you do with it will determine what happens next. Will you use this time to grow? Will you deepen your faith? Will you develop your gifts? Will you allow God to strengthen you, to sharpen you, to refine you? The choice is yours. Many will waste this time, only to look back and realize they were given an opportunity to be shaped into something greater but let it slip away. But chosen ones will embrace it. They will see it for what it truly is, a divine setup for their next level. The preparation is never easy. The discipline is never comfortable. But it is necessary. And when you emerge from this, you will not just be ready, you will be unstoppable. If you are serious about using this season to prepare for what's next, if you are ready to embrace the process instead of resisting it, comment "I am ready" below. Because what comes after this will change everything. What happens after the isolation ends? The doors will open. The people who once disappeared will be replaced by those who align with your purpose. The relationships that drained you will be exchanged for connections that uplift you. The opportunities that once seemed impossible will begin to manifest. And when they do, you will realize that every tear, every lonely night, and every moment of doubt was not wasted. It was leading you to this moment. The isolation you endured was not an accident. The pain you felt was not meaningless. It was all a divine setup, positioning you for the life you were always meant to step into. And now, as the pieces begin to fall into place, you will finally understand why things had to happen the way they did. You were never forgotten. You were being prepared. You were being strengthened. And now, the time has come to step into what has been waiting for you all along. But before you step forward, take a moment to reflect. Look back on who you were before the isolation began. You are not the same person. The things that used to shake you no longer have power over you. The need for external validation has been replaced with an unshakable confidence. The fears that once held you back have been dismantled, one by one. You have been transformed in ways you never expected. But this transformation did not come without a price. You had to endure the silence. You had to sit with yourself. You had to release what no longer served you. And for a while, it felt like you were losing everything. But now, you see it clearly, you were never losing, you were being refined. The things that left were not meant for you. The people who walked away were not part of your destiny. The doors that closed were protecting you from what would have hindered your purpose. And now, as the new season begins, you realize that what is ahead is so much greater than what was left behind. The Bible tells us in Zephaniah 3 verses 19 to 20, "Behold, at that time I will undo all that afflict thee, and I will save her that halteth, and gather her that was driven out, and I will get them praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. At that time will I bring you again, even in the time that I gather you. For I will make you a name and a praise among all people of the earth, when I turn back your captivity before your eyes, saith the Lord." This is your restoration. This is the moment where God lifts you from obscurity, where everything that was once withheld from you is released. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every battle, it was all leading here. Your period of hiding is over. Your season of being overlooked has ended. The things that once rejected you will now recognize your value. The very places where you were dismissed will become the places where you thrive. God is turning it all around, and when He does, it will be undeniable that His hand was on you the entire time. And as this shift happens, you will begin to see the signs everywhere. The people who once doubted you will start to take notice. The opportunities that once seemed impossible will begin to present themselves. Divine connections will appear out of nowhere. People who align with your spirit, who see your value, who uplift you instead of draining you. The doors that remained locked for so long will swing open effortlessly. And as you step through them, you will feel a deep sense of recognition. This is what you were waiting for. This is what the isolation was preparing you for. The doubts will fade. The questions will be answered. And most importantly, the purpose that once seemed unclear will now shine brighter than ever before. You will no longer wonder why you had to endure the journey you did, because you will see that every delay, every closed door, and every painful lesson was part of a bigger plan. This is not just a breakthrough, it is a new beginning. You are not stepping back into the world as the same person who once felt lost, rejected, or uncertain. You are stepping forward with clarity, with wisdom, and with a strength that was forged in the fire of your solitude. And as you walk into this new chapter, remember this: you were never meant to stay hidden forever. The isolation was temporary. The struggle was a process. But now it is time to rise. It is time to claim what is yours. It is time to walk boldly into everything that has been prepared for you. Because now the waiting is over. The breakthrough has arrived. And you are finally stepping into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. If you know deep in your spirit that this message was meant for you, if you are ready to walk into your breakthrough, comment "I am ready" below. The season of isolation has ended. The doors are opening, and your time is now. There are moments in life when solitude feels like an unbearable weight, when the silence stretches too long, when the absence of familiar voices makes you question your place in the world, when you wonder if you were ever meant to belong at all. You have known this feeling well, the ache of being set apart, the restlessness of standing at the edge of something unknown, the tension between where you are and where you know you are meant to be. You have wrestled with questions that seem to have no answers, searching for meaning in the spaces where you once felt forgotten. But hear this now: this was never about loneliness. It was never about rejection. It was never about punishment. It was about preparation. Every season of waiting, every moment of isolation, every closed door was not a sign that you were abandoned, but proof that you were being set apart for something greater. It is difficult to see it when you are in the midst of it. When friendships fade, when opportunities slip through your fingers, when the path ahead seems uncertain, it is easy to believe that something is wrong, that you have been left behind while others move forward. You have likely asked yourself why. Why was your journey different? Why did others seem to find their way while you remained in the wilderness? Why did the things you once held so tightly fall away, leaving you with nothing but questions? But now, as the pieces begin to come together, you must recognize the truth. Your waiting was not in vain. What felt like loss was actually divine refinement. What seemed like delay was actually alignment. You were not being kept from something, you were being prepared for something. And now, the time of preparation is ending. The door that once seemed so distant is finally opening before you. This is your moment. This is the point where you choose whether you will cling to the comfort of what is familiar or step into the unknown with the confidence that you were made for more. If this message has spoken to you, if something in your spirit is stirring in a way you cannot ignore, do not stay silent. Declare it. Speak it into existence. Comment "I am chosen" below. Let it be a proclamation, a statement of truth that you are no longer bound by the limitations of your past. You are stepping forward, fully present, fully prepared, fully aligned with the destiny that has been waiting for you.